everybody. Hope everybody's had a great week. I am back doing another Life is Strange theory video. Now, this isn't going to cover Double Exposure. This is going to be going over theories related to the first game / Before the Storm. But with Double Exposure's early release coming out, I will talk about it briefly right here. I personally haven't played it yet. I bought the base version of the game because I just couldn't justify spending $70 for cat content, cosmetics, and playing the game early. Maybe that's just me. It just felt a little odd with how expensive it was, especially when I could get the base game for like $50. Before we get into it, spoilers for the first 2 episodes, really just one aspect that everybody's kind of going crazy about. There's been a lot of backlash about how they have handled Chloe and Max's relationship if you decide to sacrifice Arcadia Bay. And honestly, I don't agree. I think it's perfectly realistic that Chloe and Max would break up because Chloe at the end of the game is begging Max to, save the town, and that even though she doesn't love everyone in there, they don't deserve to die. And if you choose not to, you basically tell her, no, I'm choosing you over everyone else. I'm not going to do what you want. And it's just, that's not a good way to start a relationship. And then on top of that, in my opinion, Chloe was never over Rachel. No matter how badly Rachel treated her, Chloe is not over her. Through all of the things that she finds out about Rachel and Frank, Rachel and Nathan's relationship as well, it's just, I don't understand why there's so much vitriolic hate because of this choice. People refunding the game. I don't know. It feels a little overblown to react like this just because your favorite ship didn't make it, I guess. I don't know. I don't see it that way. And plus, I'm sacrificing Chloe. Sorry. But today's video, like I said, is going to be some Life is Strange theories, so let's get into it. We're going to start this off with a very, very kind of eerie, dark theory about the original game, and this is before any of the sequels came out or anything like that. And basically, it suggests that Max doesn't actually have this power, that it's really all in her head, and the vision you see at the beginning of the game is the base reality. The town does get destroyed no matter what. But the whole game is Max dealing with that grief and going back and thinking to herself, is there anything I could have done differently to prevent this from happening? That was an early theory, which is very, very dark. And I think it's interesting. It doesn't really hold much water now that we have so many sequels that show both versions of the timeline. But overall, it's kind of just a fun one in a bubble. There is a lot of what I would call foreshadowing of Double Exposure in a lot of these theories that people discuss about Max's powers and what exactly they are. A lot of people point to when Max is doing research about her powers on her laptop, there's an article related to wormholes. And this sparked the whole idea that Max isn't actually going back in time, but she's simply going to different universes, going back, opening these wormholes and trying something new, and it's creating all these branching timelines. And this is backed up by the fact that it is much harder for Max to pause time, for example, when she's trying to save Kate, rather than it is to go backwards in time. And so that would mean, under this theory, that her pausing time is opening a fabric in space and time, allowing her to move through this sort of weird middle dimension, which would obviously, I feel like, take a lot more effort than just hopping between different timelines. The other little thing that backs this up is that the rewind meter is a swirl, and it sort of looks like a crudely drawn wormhole. And on top of that, you also have Max jumping between different timelines and all of her hallucinations throughout episode 5 when she's seeing all these different visions, going through the weird Mr. Jefferson sneaking section, or seeing all these people in front of her taunting her. all of that stuff could be a result of breaking these timelines or the timelines crashing together because of this giant storm. And then on top of that, she literally meets herself from a different timeline where she talks about leaving behind all the other Maxes. So it feels very cut and dry that it's not a linear thing. She's going to different timelines. And then in the comics as well, this is backed up as Max travels between multiple different timelines, one where Rachel's alive, one where she's with Warren, and they all exist simultaneously. And she has the ability to go through them. And all of this comes together to show you where the groundwork for double exposure came from with this new ability of hers to hop back and forth. The next character we're going to talk about is Warren, and a lot of people seem to love Warren. We're going to talk about Warren next. Now, Warren is a character that I feel you either love him or hate him. I know someone who absolutely loves Warren to death, and then I also have a friend who hates Warren and thinks he's creepy. These people go back and forth on, is Warren, a genuine kind of innocent type of guy, or is there something more sinister there? And their reasoning on it is fairly solid, but I also feel it can be interpreted in an innocent way, as a lot of these Warren fans have interpreted it. So number one is that Warren recommends the movie Cannibal Holocaust to Max, and a lot of people point to his quote of him saying that he laughed his ass off and he's going on about it for a while, and that he just plays it off very nonchalantly, and that this movie includes, violence towards animals as well as sexual violence in some sense, and is a overall very, very graphic and very disturbing movie. It's considered as one of the most disturbing movies ever if you look it up. And the fact that he's talking about this to Max and he's making light of it, a lot of people take that the wrong way. The only real defense of this is that he's trying to appear cool in front of the girl he likes, and he's in high school, so he's like, whoa, oh yeah, that didn't disturb me, I was laughing at that. Sort of one of those guys trying to appear more like metal or whatever. I can definitely understand with the nature of Cannibal Holocaust specifically, why people are like, that's really weird. But I can also see how it comes from he's trying to appear cool in front of a girl he likes by being like, yeah, that doesn't disturb me. Like, I don't know. Warren leaves a note for Max, and this is one that I can't really defend as much. He leaves a note for Max, and it includes the mention of a movie called Ultra Vixens, and that is a movie that contains a lot of excessive nudity and borders on being like pornographic in a sense, which, yeah, that's weird. He's weird. We can all agree that Warren is weird. That's not what I'm saying. But this is more of if he's malicious or not. And that one's weird. That one's very weird. I'll give you that one. In the beginning of episode 2, it appears that Warren is spying on Max from the courtyard. And it's hard to say. He's peeking around the corner and we can see him from Max's dorm. However, I highly doubt from that angle he's really able to see all that much. He's also sort of waiting for her to try and talk to her. So that is another side of things where is he just like looking around the corner to see if she's exited yet? It is a little odd. But my friend vehemently defends that, being like, well, he's just waiting for her. He's just waiting for her to come around the corner. He's waiting to say hi to his friend. And then I've got other people who are like, he's stalking her. He's trying to peep in her windows. I don't think either side is 100% right here. Is it weird that he's peeking around corners waiting for Max? Absolutely. Is he a peeping Tom? He probably can't see from that far. It's still weird. Is it entirely normal that he's doing that? No. Now, this final one does take a bit of leeway to fully believe. There is, in Warren's locker, if you go through the boys' locker room during the pool night section, in Warren's locker is a photo of Max and him together. And Max sort of makes a comment that implies that she doesn't fully remember taking this photo. And this has led people to believe that Warren photoshopped 2 separate images of them together to make it look like they took a photo together. And people take They use the fact that he mentioned he's good at graphic editing software when Max and him are talking about Daniel's portrait of her online. This one, I feel like this one's a little out there. And we also have to remember who our narrator is. Our narrator is Max Caulfield, who forgets to text people back all the time. If you look at her text messages with like her dad, her friends, she does not answer anyone. Even her parents, she doesn't answer them when they're like, "Happy birthday, sweetheart." She doesn't text her dad back. And then on top of that, you have in Before the Storm, if you look at their texts, she's super dismissive, she's very forgetful, and yes, she's busy with her new life. But I moved as a kid, and I still keep in touch with most of my friends. I go to college in a whole different state than my friends, and I still keep in touch with them. I think we just have to accept that Max isn't that great of a friend all the time, and it's entirely possible for her to just not really remember taking that photo. However, if Elliot, the guy from Before the Storm, were in this situation, I would fully believe that he's photoshopping images of him and Chloe together, which I feel like Elliot is a character fully intended for those Warren haters to be like, no, if we wanted Warren to be a nutcase, this is how we would have done him, because Elliot sort of takes that Warren role, but if Warren was like crossed with Nathan, like just very creepy and excessive. People also think that Warren has some sort of violent nature because of the movies, as well as the fact that he beats up on Nathan if you let him. But you gotta think, this guy's been bullying him for God knows how long, and he's finally getting that out, and obviously it's a choice. He calms down if you tell him to, and he even says, if he does go through with it, that he regrets it. So really, I'm a pro-Warren guy, what can I say? But overall, I do think it's interesting when you put it all together like that, because it's like, ooh, maybe this guy is a little weird, but it does feel a little far-fetched in some areas. Next, we're going to get into some theories about Kate. There is an idea that she may be buying drugs from Frank. This is really interesting to me because we see her go through this depression after what occurs at the Vortex Club party, and it would be another interesting layer to that if she actually sought out buying drugs in order to try and get through this hard time. So in Frank's book, he has someone listed as Katie, and her little code name is Chihuahua. Now, Kate obviously sounds similar to Katie, and Chihuahua, being a small dog that you don't really pay much mind to, also fits in with Kate. She would be super sheepish, she would have never bought drugs before. So for Frank to kind of almost jokingly put her down as Chihuahua because she's this tiny, innocent girl makes a lot of sense to me. On top of that, Katie buys sleeping pills from Frank. These sleeping pills are called Green Dream, and if taken in an excessive amount, they can cause death. Now for Kate, it makes sense for her to be seeking out things like that. Number one, just to sleep, because I believe she even mentions that she can't sleep anymore. On top of that, because of what she attempts to do, her buying these pills with a much darker intention also lines up for her. However, some things that don't really add up is that the drug deals themselves with Katie don't take place at Blackwell, which is where she spends most of her time. However, I can't really imagine Frank being able to sneak onto the Blackwell premises to do these deals with David Madsen running around like a madman. But also, she purchases weed and acid from him, which doesn't sound super in line with Kate, unless she's trying to sort of ease the pain or forget about what happened to her. It just doesn't, that part doesn't really add up, and that pokes a big hole in this theory for me. It's very, very likely that Kate managed to survive the storm, even if it ravages through Arcadia Bay. If she's in the hospital, hospitals are very, very strong buildings, built to withstand these kinds of crazy events. And on top of that, most hospitals do have some sort of shelter in effect, especially if they're on the coast, because they have to deal, more so the East Coast, they have a lot more hurricanes, but even so, most of them do have these sorts of shelters in place. And also, if, let's say she gets released after 48 hours and goes back to her family, even then, it would leave enough time between her getting out of the hospital and the storm coming for her and her family to leave town once word of it, was starting to spread. Next, we're going to get into some theories about David Madsen. Once again, a very controversial character. Many people thought that he himself could be responsible for what happens in the dark room or what that whole bunker is. But I think the most interesting theory, and I believe we've touched on this very briefly, is that David may have been more onto Nathan and Mr. Jefferson than we initially thought. I believe that he actually nearly successfully broke into the dark room in that sort of hidden barn area. So we know that David has surveillance data that proves that Nathan and Jefferson went to the barn together. On top of that, when Max arrives, she makes a comment that the padlock is new. But once we get to the armored door that has the keypad, we can see that it's very worn down and that clearly that password has not been changed. So the theory goes that while surveillancing Nathan and Mr. Jefferson, David ended up going to the bunker. He was able to break the padlock, but wasn't able to get through the armored door. He couldn't figure out the combination for that door, hence why that hasn't been changed. Next up on our list is the homeless lady that Max meets behind the Two Whales Diner. I remember when the game was on its own, many people believed that this lady was Max from an alternate timeline, someone who got lost in the shift of things. The main things that led people to believe this is that she eats the same cereal as Max. There's a box right next to her. Her lips also have a slight gap when when her face is resting. The only character who consistently does as well is Max. Whoa. The only character that consistently does as well is Max. And on top of that, she says a lot of very ominous things, and that's also in the same area where you can find the ants swirling in that vortex. However, the creators of the game denied this theory. However, with Double Exposure experimenting much more with alternate timelines, it's absolutely possible for it to connect in some new way. Next, we're going to get into some theories about Nathan's father. I think these are very interesting because it posits a few different ideas. Because at the time, before the storm wasn't out, we didn't really have a visual of Nathan's father. Everyone kind of takes for granted that Before the Storm shows a direct interaction with Nathan and his dad. And it really adds a lot to the first game because we never really get to see that, we just hear about it. This sort of lack of a person, this lack of having Mr. Prescott as a real character, fully voiced, who appears in the game, led a lot of people to believe that Nathan and Mr. Jefferson were related, and that Mr. Jefferson was somehow his father. But this is largely flawed due to having a lot of eyewitness accounts of his father. I believe, Luke Parker even comments saying, "I met him once at a Bigfoot's game, mean fucking bastard. Oh man, he explains it, Nathan." And so other things like that and other comments and records of him existing sort of disprove that. However, in a much more metaphorical sense, Mr. Jefferson does take on a very fatherly role with Nathan, sort of guiding him and treating him as a protege, and at least making him believe that, because we do have those clips of Jefferson talking, being like, "I never really cared about him, he was rash, blah, 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 blah," that sort of evil maniac stuff. The other very interesting thing that, once again, we touched on briefly, actually in my last video as well, is whether or not Nathan's father knew about what was going on in the dark room. It is not explicitly said that he does, however, I feel it's very unlikely, with the amount of money that he put into this thing, for them not to know of at least its existence. We do know from that cut line from Nathan that the Prescotts are at least somewhat aware of a storm coming. And if we want to go into more of the cut content route, we know that they would have had a much bigger role to play in knowing the storm was coming, and perhaps there was some ritual, because we know that Nathan went out to these random points in the woods. So it leads me to believe that at the very least, they were aware of this oncoming storm and knew they needed to create a shelter for it. And that's sort of where the dark room started. Nathan's father also knows about his son's mental health troubles. We know because these files are stored within the Blackwell computer system of Nathan's strange drawings and ramblings. So it could be possible that all he knows is that Mr. Jefferson is helping him out and taking him under his wing, and they asked for all this stuff, and he's sort of blindly throwing cash at the problem, and, oh, well, we did have this bunker already, you guys can use that for whatever weird art projects are going on. However, I do feel that there is a much more malicious side to things here. And so this is going to be it for this theory video. I hope everyone enjoyed it. I hope everyone's enjoying Double Exposure so far. I know I'm looking forward to playing it. I'm very, very excited. So thank you guys so much for watching once again. I hope you have a good morning or evening or, you know, whatever.